So we're going to go ahead and show the build of the front servo, the servo gearbox of an MR-03 Mini Z. We're building this Bison chassis, and we're using the stock gearbox right now, but we want to put this back in our box stock, and we're going to build a Delrin and brass fourth gear servo box here. And so I figured I might as well show the process. It's pretty complex, lots of little parts. And so this hopefully will help you put together yours if you take it apart and you need to figure out how to put it back together, or if you're upgrading to the Delrin or metal brass fourth gear. All right, this stuff will help clean up a lot of the slop in the gearbox, make it a little bit tighter, and the brass fourth gear just helps with durability and whatnot. So. It takes multiple kits. I'll go ahead and link down in the description below what kits you need to buy. You need to buy the small parts kit, which comes with battery clips and a bunch of other stuff. You need to buy the servo saver, and then there obviously the gears and the fourth gear, and then there are some pins. There's a 3-pin set, or 3 pins. I think these came with the servo saver. One of them did. One of the other ones came with the pin set. So we'll link all that in the description below. So this is the main back plate where your servo motor sits in. This portion here. And you have the long pin and the shorter pin. These are the same size. And then you have your 4 different gears. They're all different sizes, all 4 different sizes. You can see here the very first lowest gear is going to be the most flat, then the second most flat, then the thickest, and then we have the different gear style. It's a lot more easier to identify. So the key to this is just noticing that the thinner gear is the first gear, then you stack on the second most thick gear and the third most thick gear. Okay, this tall gear here is our fourth gear, and we're replacing that with the brass fourth gear. So these 3 gears, you should be able to feel it, they spin smoothly. Okay, if they're not spinning smoothly, then you've got the order wrong. So make sure you check your order. Again, thinnest to the thickest, and part of that's because they spin slower and the torque moves to the outside, moving forward. So the teeth become larger and thicker to withstand that extra strain that's going to be on the gear. Okay. Your fourth gear then just goes right on top. And the whole thing should move super smooth. Now, if you're just upgrading your Delrin and metal fourth gear, that's all you need is the Delrin gears and the metal fourth gear. You don't need anything else. You don't need the small parts kit. You don't need the pins. None of that. Servo saver, you're just going to reuse all your stock stuff there. But we're building a completely new servo gearbox, so we needed all the parts. A nice little trick to knowing which direction things go, there's this channel here for your wire, actually, that your wires run through, and so you can line that up to make sure you know that you're facing the correct direction, this little channel. I don't know if you can see it very well. There you go. Basically, the wires run through here, so knowing that might help you know which direction all the plates go. The next thing you're going to put in is the pin for the servo horn. Now, don't be too intimidated by this thing. I know there's a lot of little parts, but it goes together fairly simple. It just takes a little bit of time. So your servo horn just goes on like so. The pin side facing up. And then this little arm for the servo horn. It's got a notch in it. That notch goes on the horn side. Okay. See the stock one, and then you have the this little outer gear box portion, and again, if you follow the channel, it makes it easy to know which direction it goes. So we went ahead and removed our E-clip from our servo saver. This is going to let us take our spring out and take up some of the slop by adding a shim. No, those shims won't work. I was hoping that the shims were going to be big enough, but they're not. You definitely need a much larger shim. I saw in another video that they shimmed it with a 3.1 by 4 by 0.03, and they actually used 2 of them. We're going to see if we have some shims that'll work. If not, we're just going to leave it, put it back stock. But the shims will help add some preload. That should help take up some of the slop. Nice. So the shims are actually the same size as the shims that we use on the SEX 24 axles. I just dropped one. Oh, it's on my finger. So the SEX 24 axle shims will work just fine. So that's pretty awesome. Now when you're putting this guy back together, remember, it goes like this, which means the plastic arm goes in first, facing away from the spring, and the metal arm goes in second with the pin facing towards the spring. We'll go ahead and throw our E-clip back on. And we're good to go. So that should help remove some of the slop, and you can do that even on just your stock box, your box stock or Evo MR-03. Just take out a little bit of slop, add some preload, good to go. There's a pretty noticeable difference. So yeah, we definitely like that. Yeah, that's very weak. And the purpose of the servo saver is so that if you hit a wall or hit an endpoint or something weird happens, the servo saver will keep your servo from stripping gears and whatnot. But with these better Delrin gears and the metal gear, you can have it a little bit more tight. And then we have our long pin, and our servo saver just goes right on top of that. And the metal pin goes into the arm. Okay, make sure you feel everything, that it moves smoothly. And if it does, you're good to put your cap back on here. Some people recommended to grease this up either with lithium grease or something similar. It's not really ideal. You kind of just want to keep it clean. You run these dry. That's the way they come from the factory. And the Delrin really doesn't need it. The Delrin kind of is, in a way, self-lubricating. So you don't really need to put any sort of oil or grease in there. All right, simple as that. So again, I know it's intimidating, but once you've walked through it once, it's pretty simple. And then you can just throw it back in your car. So then we just go ahead and put our potentiometer in. Remember, this little piece fits into the groove on the servo horn. Your wires face down, and then we can put our cap back on. Remember, you don't want to force anything. This all goes together very, very easily. If anything feels forced, you're probably not set correct or something is slightly off. So just make sure you're not forcing things in. Okay, then you can take your wires and you can tuck them back in. That's what that little channel is for. And take your servo motor, and it should fit right in. And then you're going to be able to put your entire assembly back into the car. Oh, you know what? We forgot to replace our Delrin pinion. So let's go ahead and do that. This little guy just pulls right off. And the Delrin pinion, whoa, we dropped it. Just goes right back on there. Now, mind you, it's a little tight because it's Delrin, and they want to make sure it's not slipping off. So you will have to push it a little bit, but nothing crazy. And then we'll put our motor back in. Let's twist our wires back in there, get them nice and tucked in. And put the assembly back in the car. Now, we might end up having to pull up our top plate here to get our motor to fit just in this guy. Oh, no, we're good. Getting the servo assembly back into the car is kind of a task because it's got to be just right. But again, just take your time. Don't force it. Oh, we're kind of having issues with our motor. We have to pull the motor out. So on a normal box stock, you can slide the motor in after the fact. Or while you're putting it together, excuse me. But in this, we're going to have to put the motor in after we get it in because we have this top plate on the car. And it's kind of preventing the motor from going, or preventing the servo box assembly from going into its home. All right, so a good little trick is to kind of bring it in from the back, make sure that, because this front plate's really tight, and just kind of get it in and then slide it down in, and then it'll slide inward like that. Okay, now we just got to get our motor in there, and we're good to go. All right. I think getting the box back in is the hardest part of the whole thing. So on this, we're going to have to pull this off and reset up our steering linkage here. You can try to get it in there when you're putting the case back on, but it's kind of hard sometimes, so it's just easier just to reset the entire steering link. That is one of the nice things about the new Bison chassis. The previous Skyline chassis, you'd have to remove the entire front end, the entire thing, the entire assembly to get to this. So this allows you to swap out your steering links, to change your camber and toe and all that good stuff, and not have to pull the whole thing apart. So we're going to go ahead and just plug it in and test our servo before we get it all back together, just in case there's something wrong. And there we go. Looks pretty smooth. That should be a good improvement for sure. We're excited. Now mind you, it's a little off because we're not tight in the motor. You can see the motor turning a little bit. It'll be much better when we get our top back on. So we're gonna go ahead and put it back together and we'll be off to the races. And here we are all back together. Seems good. Hope that helped somebody. If it did, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with anybody else who might have an issue or want to know about the Delrin gears or the metal fourth gear. And yeah, get out there, run your cars, smash them, crash them, and bash them, but don't break the expensive parts.